Okay folks, this is what we're going to make. This is Douglas DC-3, or the military variant is the C-47. And we're going to use SketchUp to make it, and our primary intent is so that we can take and 3D print it. I based my design on a blueprint that I found from drawingdatabase.com. And so if I just type in C-47, there it is. Now there's all kinds of other aircraft. So if you wanted to make like a Lancaster bomber, I'm sure it's in here somewhere. There's here's Heinkel's, whatever you want to do. It's basically going to be the same process. On my website though, I have a link that you can go ahead and click right here so that you can download the blueprint if you decide to stick with this one, or your teacher can give it to you. Before we get started, a few tips. First of all, this video that I made right here is probably going to be indispensable. And when you look at the table of contents, you'll see that there's all kinds of indexed videos. So it's an hour and a half long. I don't recommend you watch the whole thing start to finish. You're not going to learn much that way. However, as you're following along, one mouse click at a time, building your own DC-3, say I do something with the Move tool and you want to know a little bit more about it. Well, there it is right there. So you just go ahead and click on that time mark, and it'll open up at that specific spot and give you a 1 or 2 minute explanation of how you use the Move tool. You also have within SketchUp here the instructor. Once I start a command, say R for rectangle, the instructor over here is going to give you just a quick overview of how to use the rectangle tool, but much more important are the modifier keys. And that's particularly true with the Move tool. So let's go ahead and make just a little quick geometry here. So I'm just going to make a rectangle like this, and then I'm going to type P for push-pull, and the instructor changes to the current command. And so again, it'll give you the basic tool operations. So there's quite a bit that you can do with the push-pull tool, and the modifier keys, such as the option or the command key, are going to open up all kinds of different possibilities. SketchUp for Schools, or SketchUp for the web, uses these different nested menus, and some people love them. I don't like them. Probably the most indispensable icon on the screen is the search tool. So if I want to start an arc, I can type in arc and just go ahead and click on it. And I can make a keyboard shortcut if I want for it as well. However, there is already a keyboard shortcut built in for the arc command. The one that I'm going to use time and time again though during these screencasts is X-ray. So I'll type in X dash, and there's X-ray, and you can see right here that I have already set my keyboard shortcut to the X key. And so while you can turn it on or off like this, once you've set that keyboard shortcut, you can just go ahead and type in the X key, whatever you want. And that is probably the most useful keyboard shortcut that I can suggest for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I am using the web-based version of SketchUp. That's either SketchUp Free or SketchUp for Schools. Essentially the same thing, except that if you're using the free version, web version, your files are stored in the cloud on Trimble Connect. And if you're using SketchUp for Schools, they are stored on your Google Drive. So we're going to go ahead and create a new file using millimeters, because that's what we use when we're working with 3D printing slicing software. So we'll select that, and then we're going to take and just get rid of the lady. We don't need her. And you might have a different figure again. It just depends. Now you've got all your different tools over here that you can use. And I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts. So when I want to make a line, I'm going to type the letter L. and you're going to see the letter L pop up on your top of the screen, and I'll verbally tell you which keyboard shortcuts I'm using. I just find them very easy to use, much easier than trying to find out where they hid the line icon or the arc icon, or some of these ones that are nested that you don't use very often. First thing I'm going to do, it's good practice, is I'm going to go ahead and save this project. Again, yours will look a little bit different. So I'm going to put it in a DC-3 folder. So I've already modeled the DC-3 once, so I'm going to go ahead and this time just call it C-47, which is the military variant or model. There we go. So I'll just click Save here. Let's go ahead and begin by inserting our blueprint. So we'll go up here and go to Insert. And I'm going to insert it from my computer, and there we go, and there's the file. So I'll double click on that, and I want to insert it as an image. And so there it is, stuck to my cursor. So it's good practice to place the corner of your image on the origin where the blue, green, and red axes meet. So I'll click once, and then as I move it I can resize it. And it doesn't matter a hoot at this point where you go ahead and click the second time how big or how small you make it, because the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and resize it. So there it is. Now I'm going to come in here into, let's see, yep, that's what I want right there, my scenes. I'm going to go to my top view. So there we have it. That is our image that we're going to go ahead and trace. Now, remember how I just said it doesn't really matter initially how large you bring in the blueprint? And that's true, but now we're going to size it properly. Your 3D printer is going to have a space limitation. So mine happens to be about 210 millimeters wide. So if I make my wing too big, make it 300 millimeters wide, then my printer's not going to be able to execute that. However, it's a good idea to know what the size limitations are of your printer. However, if you're unsure at this point, just go ahead and make it the wing 180 millimeters wide, because once you take and export this, you can take and scale it and make it bigger, make it smaller, and everything scales proportionally, so that'll work as well. So let's get back into SketchUp here, and we're going to zoom in on the wing, which is the widest or longest part. I'm going to type L for line, and I'm just going to draw a line approximately from one wingtip to the other. Now, if you look down in the measurement dialog box in the lower corner, it told me that that line is about almost 1800 millimeters long, and that's obviously too long, isn't it? So let's find out how long it is exactly by typing in T for the tape measure tool, and let's measure from this endpoint to this endpoint of the line, and the little pop-up tells me it's 1756 millimeters long. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the other endpoint, and then without doing anything else, do not click down in the measurement dialog box, do not click OK, don't hit enter, just go ahead and type in 180 using your keyboard, and when you then hit enter, you get this pop-up that says, do you want to resize the model? In other words, do you want to resize everything? And we'll say yes. So we'll click OK, and it looks like it shrunk, and in real life it did. So I'm going to go Shift Z to do a zoom extents to bring everything into view, and now when I measure this, it's 180 millimeters long. So anything we draw from here on out, we can be pretty sure that it's going to fit on the bed of our 3D printer. Now I'm going to type the space bar, which brings up the arrow or the select tool. It's this one right up here, and that's a very handy shortcut. So you can get out of any command by just typing the space bar, and it brings you back to the select tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that line because I don't need it anymore. I only used it to scale the drawing. And hit delete. And then I'm going to use the wheel on my mouse to come into here. And I'm going to begin by drawing the horizontal stabilizer first. Okay, so this is what the finished horizontal stabilizer is going to look like. And it's going to need to fit inside this rectangular slot so that we can assemble our model together. And so we need to kind of maybe take some notes as we go along here. So let's go ahead and begin drawing. So the horizontal stabilizer is symmetrical, so I don't need to draw both halves. I can just draw one half, and then I'll show you how to copy over the other half or mirror it. So I'm going to start with the pencil tool. I'll use the icon this time. Actually, technically it's the line tool. Let's just go ahead and click on this line right here for now. And let's go over along the red axis. Let's zoom in here so I can see, or so that you can see what's going on a little bit better. And see how it's kind of jumping around and snapping? Okay, so we need to go back and adjust something. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape right now. And I'm going to come into my model information. And so with my model information opened up here, you can see that we are drawing in millimeters, but we want to change the precision because right now it's snapping to every 1 millimeter down here. So let's change the precision to say 3 decimal places. And let's change this number here, instead of 1 millimeter, let's make it 0.001 millimeters, which is really very small, but that's okay. So we'll hit enter, and then we'll come back and restart our line tool and come from here over to about there. And I go ahead and pause right there, and then I'm going to come up, and I want to come up a whole number. So right now I'm looking down in the measurement dialog box and it says about this point it is about 19-20 millimeters. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just click well short of it, and then I can change the length of the line by just typing in 20. So I type in 20, and I did not click down in that box. If you do that, it's not going to work. You just go ahead. SketchUp is waiting for you to tell it what to do. So we'll go ahead, type in 20, hit enter, and we've now got a line that is 20 millimeters long. And I'm going to come over to about here on my fuselage, and then I'll come down to about right there. Now you don't have to trace it exactly. You know, what I'm doing is good enough. And then I'm going to come down to here, click, and then along the red axis, click there, and you should get a face. SketchUp draws everything based on a series of edges, and when you enclose or connect those edges so that it's what's called watertight, then it makes a face for you. Of course, all the edges have to be in the same plane. Now you can zoom in here and, you know, try to make a semi-decent arc here, but instead what I'm going to do is just type in A for arc. And I'm going to click once here. That's where my arc starts. Down in the lower left part of my screen it says, ask me where do I want the end point of the arc to be. So I want it to be right there. So I'll click one more time, and then we give it what is called the bulge. Now see that red line across the middle? That means we're drawing in the same plane. And that is, we're drawing along the red axis. And we'll come out to about here. E for erase, and I can erase this line segment here. So I've now got half of my horizontal stabilizer. I'm going to go ahead and choose a view like this. You can also hold down the wheel on your mouse to orbit around. And I'll zoom in here, and now I'm going to use the push-pull tool to give this thickness. So I'll come to this face, click on it, pull it up, and I'm going to type in 2.5 millimeters. So now you've got two numbers that are important to remember. The length of this right here So in other words, we're looking at this rectangle right here. It is the height of the rectangle is 2.5 millimeters and the length is 20 millimeters. And we're going to need that for making that rectangular hole in the fuselage. So with this much done, I'm going to now select this geometry. And to do that, I'm going to draw a box around it. I'm holding down my left mouse button to select everything that is completely enclosed within that selection box. And when I let go, there it is. So now I'm going to copy it, Command or Control C, and paste it. And now I've got another one. And it doesn't matter where we put it, so let's just stick it over there for now. Then I'm going to type in S for scale. If you've used other CAD programs and you're used to mirroring things, SketchUp doesn't have a mirror button or a mirror command. What you do instead is you scale it. So I type in S for scale, and then I grab this point right here, and I just start to drag it and turn it inside out. And where you stop is always -1. Now I stopped at -0.8, so what I'm going to do is type in -1. It's always -1 if you want to mirror something. I'll hit return. So there we have that. Hold down my shift key, press on my mouse button, and now I'm going to move this into position. So with it selected, I'm going to, and if you, by the way, if you accidentally deselect it, draw a box from upper left down to lower right around it like that. Or another way that you can select all of that geometry is to triple click on it quickly. Then I'm going to type in M for move, and down in the lower left corner it tells me to pick my base point. So I'm going to pick that little part right there, and then it's moving, and then I'm going to zoom in and connect it right there. Now I've got some extra lines, and normally they're not going to show, they're going to make a big difference. However, in 3D printing, extra lines can goof stuff up. So let's take our eraser and let's see, let's click outside here to deselect everything. Now let's choose E for eraser, because I don't need that line segment, that one. I'm going to run it over upside down here, and I can't see it because that's in the way, or the drawing is in the way. So let's see, I've got one here, and remember that I told you to make a keyboard shortcut for X-ray? So if you did that, type in your X key, and now I can see that line segment right there, and I can erase it. Type on the X key again to turn X-ray off, and we've now got our part. Our horizontal stabilizer is nearing completion. Now at this point, it's very important that you connect all this geometry together to protect it. All these line segments and faces need to be grouped together. Fortunately, that's very easy to do. I'm going to go ahead and tap my space bar, then I'm going to triple click on all of that geometry. I'm going to right click and make it a group. And then I'm going to come up here and choose Save, and we'll add the elevators as soon as that's done. We're going to use the push-pull tool to add our elevators, and we'll be using it for adding other little details, because right now this horizontal stabilizer is kind of plain looking. Now let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and just make kind of a box here quickly. Now if I want to change the geometry of this, say for example if I want to put a hole in this box, I type in C for circle, draw my circle on the face, and then use the push-pull tool to pull in. If I want the hole to go all the way through, I need to sort of orbit around so that I can see the back side of the box, if you will. And when I go back, see that dual shading? That's called inference. That means that I have reached that back face. So when I let go of the mouse now, I've got a hole. And so we're going to basically take and use that skill to add some detail. Whoop. I want to draw this way so that I can just delete that. Okay, so remember this is a group. So if I draw a circle on my group and try to make a hole through it with the push-pull tool, I can't go down. I can go up, I can make a cylinder, but I can't cut inside the group. And that's because the group is essentially locked. Remember, we took and made it a group by triple clicking on it and right clicking it and choosing to make a group. Now, what we can do, though, if we want to make changes to it, is right click and choose Edit Group, or a quicker way to do it is just to select it and then quickly double click on it. And you get this dashed line around here, and so we now have our individual faces that we can edit. By the way, we don't need this line segment here, and we don't need this line segment here. That was created because I started drawing the profile of the horizontal stabilizer at a point about here on the drawing. Now, I can go to my top view here if I want to look directly down at it, but here's another trick for you. Go ahead and select a face, not the group, but just a face, then right click and align the view. And now we're looking directly at it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on X-ray mode so that I can see the drawing underneath. And the first thing I notice is that I have two sort of concentric lines. Not quite sure if that's the right word or not, because concentric refers to circles or arc. However, I've got an edge right here which represents the bottom of the horizontal stabilizer, and this edge here which represents the top of the same. And that is because this is in perspective mode. Let's go ahead and turn it to parallel projection here up in the scenes window. See, now the lines are on top of each other because we're looking directly at it. So now what I want to do is draw my elevators, but what's important is that again I double click on this, or this time I will choose to edit the group. And then I'm going to type in R for rectangle and maybe pick that point right there and draw up to here along the face. Make sure you're on the face, and then I'll do the same thing about here and come down to this endpoint or vertex. So I'll turn X-ray mode off now and check my work. So this is a surface or a face, this is a face, and this is a face. So I have now split what was the top face of the entire horizontal stabilizer and created a couple of elevators for myself. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just kind of draw some lines. So I'm going to click on this face right here, and I'm going to type in F for the offset tool. And when I click inside, I can now draw a similar rectangle. We'll say that much right there. And I'm looking at my measurement dialog box, and we'll just type in 0.6 millimeters. And we'll come over to this face right here, select it, type in F for offset, click, there we go. And again, I'll just type in 0.6 and hit enter. And then I'll check my work. So that's a face, that's a face, that's a face, that's a face, and that's a face. And I can work with each of those with the push-pull tool. But what I want to do is split this. So I'm going to come up here, type in L for line, and just draw a line segment like this. Come over here, draw another one like this. And now I'm checking my work. That's a face, that's a face, and that's a face. And so I'm going to go E for erase, and erase that line segment right there. So I've now just got this and this. And this is what I am going to push-pull. Come over here and do the same for this. L for line, draw along the green axis like so, pan over, draw another line like this, E for erase, check my work, and I've split those faces correctly. So let's go just kind of orbit down around this like so for now, and I'm going to use P for push pull. Got to select this first. P for push pull, and I'm going to pull down, looking at my measurement dialog box. I think about 0.3 will work, and then I can come over here, and if I just take and double click on this face, SketchUp remembers that I want to go down 0.3 millimeters. Whatever you used last, it will remember that. So I'll click outside to close my group, and my horizontal stabilizer with elevators is now complete. Next, we're going to make the main wing, and it really isn't very much different than the horizontal stabilizer. I mean, they're both wings. We just need to make some modifications for our engines and landing gear. So again, I'm going to just start with the line tool. So I'm going to just kind of mouse along here. And again, I want this value to be a whole number so it's easy to remember. So I'm on my face and I'm looking down my measurement dialog box, and it looks like about 28 will work. So without clicking, I'm just going to type in 28 and hit enter. And I've now got a line that is 28 millimeters long. Then I'll come across here, maybe about that point right there. And then I'll come down to about here, come down like so, and let's see here. Let's add a little bit extra detail. We'll make that like so, and then come directly across. And what we want to make sure is that that preview is showing that we're going along the red axis. So I'll go ahead and click, and that makes my face. Now, notice we've got a little bit of an extra line segment there, so I'm going to type in E for eraser, hold down my left mouse button, drag through that. And sometimes you kind of have to drag slow, because with the web-based version of SketchUp, all the heavy lifting is being done by computers in the cloud. So this time when we make the wingtip, since this is more of an elliptical shape, we're just going to go ahead and use the line tool to trace it. And we're going to zoom in, and we'll click right here. And I'm just kind of coming around. Those magenta lines are telling me that's a continuation of the line, and I want it to bend. So there we go. And again, it doesn't have to be traced perfectly, but the closer you get it, the more time you spend zooming in and clicking, the smoother your wingtip will be. And I'm just holding down my shift key and pressing my mouse button. So that I can pan around quickly. And then we'll connect that endpoint right there, and we should get a face. And we do. So that's kind of sharp, isn't it? So let's go ahead and use our line tool to maybe go from this midpoint down to about that midpoint, and then E for erase, and I'll just slowly drag through those right there, and that smooths it out. That looks pretty good, and I'll get rid of that line segment right there. So now let's go ahead and orbit this around. This time, to execute the orbit command, I'm going to just press the O key and just kind of move up like so, and then go back to my select by pressing my space bar, select this face, P for push pull, and pull this up the same as the horizontal stabilizer, 2.5 millimeters. Then I'm going to go ahead and triple click on this half of the wing, and then choose to make it a group. Now to add my ailerons, I'm going to go ahead and edit the group. And so I will right click and choose to edit the group. I'll select this top face, right click, and align the view so I'm looking directly at it. Press my X key so that I'm in X-ray mode, and you can see right here the general outline of the ailerons. So let's go ahead and trace that. And again, you have to be inside the group, working and editing the inside of the group for this to work. So there is the outline of the aileron, but it's not going to show up in the 3D print unless we offset that line. So I'll type in F for offset, click on this face. Whoop, I had more than the one selected, so there we go. Oh, you see what I did there? I missed that point right there, didn't I? So I'm going to take that line segment right there and delete it, and then go back to my line command and come down along the green axis and select that. So now checking my work, I'll go to the select tool, and that is a face, and this is a face. So I'll type in F for offset, click, and maybe, what did we do before? 0.3? Doesn't have to be exactly that, but that's good. So L for line, and we'll split that face. Then we'll come across over here and split the other part right up here like this. And then E for erase, and erase that line segment, and we'll check our work here. Let's turn off X-ray, and with my select tool, that is a face, and that, missed. Got to zoom in. There we go. That's a face, and that's a face up there. So we'll now take and kind of orbit around like this. We will zoom in, select that face, type in P for push pull, and pull down. And I don't remember how much we pulled down before. I should probably be taking notes, but just eyeballing it, that looks like a good amount. So we'll just type in 0.2, and that part of the wing is coming along nicely. Now you can embellish the top of your wings any way you want. I am going to embellish mine with invasion stripes, because each C-47 during the landings at Normandy on June 6, 1944 were painted with black and white stripes on the wings and on the tail of the fuselage. It didn't matter if it was a C-47 or a fighter or a reconnaissance airplane or bomber, whatever. They all had these stripes, so they were easily identifiable. So to do that, if your group is not already edited, just double click on it to open it up for editing. You'll be able to identify that it's now ready for editing by the dash box that goes around it. And so I'm going to just type in L for line, and I'll just go from this vertex along the green axis down to here. Then I'll tap my space bar, I'll select this line, and I'm going to type in M for move. It doesn't really matter where I click for a base point, but I'll just go ahead and click, and as I start to move it, it starts to do some goofy stuff, doesn't it? But what I want to do is not just move it, but I want to copy it. So I'm going to tap my Option or Alt key once, and see, now I'm just going to come in here and eyeball what to me looks like a reasonable distance. Let's see, that's about 3 millimeters. I'm just going to type in 2, hit enter. If I don't like it, without clicking anywhere, I can type in 3 and hit enter, or I can type in 1 and hit enter, and I can do that over and over and over again until I get what I want. But I kind of like 2, so I'll type in 2 and hit enter. Now, I can do that again and again and again, and that works, but SketchUp has this neat tool built in. Now notice I have not clicked my mouse. I have not touched my keyboard. But what I'm going to do now is type in 5x to make 5 more copies. And now I'll hit enter. And so now I have 1, 2, 3 invasion stripes. So I'll go ahead and just hit enter, grab my select tool, E for eraser, and slowly drag across this extra geometry up here that I don't need. And then I will sort of orbit around, click on this face, type P for push pull, pull down a little bit, so we'll say 0.3, and then I'll come over here and double click, and come over here and double click, and I've now got my invasion stripes. So there's just one more thing we need to do, and so let's go ahead and click on this group and then double click on it to open up the group for editing. Right click and align the view so we're looking directly at it, and type X for X-ray. And what I need to do is make a notch, and you'll see why later on, for the engine and landing gear assembly that we're going to use for assembling our model. So I'm just going to go ahead and again execute the line tool, kind of pick a point about here, come down, in this case maybe about 6 millimeters. I'm going to come across 2.5 millimeters because that's the thickness of our 3D printed parts. Hit enter and come up to here. And so now checking my work, that's a face and this is a face. So I'll orbit around like so. There we go. My mouse doesn't always work with the web-based version of SketchUp like I want it to. In any event, P for push pull. I'll click on this face and pull down until I get to this bottom edge, and that makes a notch for me. So we'll turn X-ray off, and you can see we have that notch. So I'll hit my space bar for select, click out here, and you probably know what's coming next. I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to copy it and then paste it, click up here, type in S for scale, grab a grip and start to drag. And what number do I put in if I want to mirror part? Excellent answer there, Andy. So we'll type in -1 and hit enter, and we now have a mirror image of that group. So I'll hit my space bar to get back to my select tool. It's still selected. Type in M for move, grab that vertex right there and come down and attach it right there. And that's looking pretty good. All we need to do now is just go ahead and edit this geometry so that it's going to be happier when it comes time for 3D printing. To do that, I'm going to take, since I can't edit two groups at the same time, I'm going to click on this group right here, and I am going to explode it, which basically ungroups everything. So now that that's done, this is a face, this is a face, this is an edge. I'm going to select this one right here, right click, and explode it. So now it is no longer grouped together. Then I'm going to come up here and grab my erase tool and erase that line segment and erase this line segment. I'll orbit around, erase that line segment. And remember, because of our blueprint, I can't see the bottom. So I'll just kind of zoom in here, go to X-ray mode, and there's the line segment I want to erase. Then I'll go to my top view and turn X-ray mode off. And then I'm going to draw a selection rectangle from top left to lower right. Notice the selection box is a solid line. What that's telling me is that only the line segments and faces that are inside of it are going to be selected. It's not going to select the drawing below. When I let go of the mouse, it selects everything that's associated with my wing. I'm going to right click, make it a group, and now the wing of our DC-3 is done. Next we're going to move on to making the fuselage, and just a couple things that I want to point out before we begin that are important. There's a lot of detail in this blueprint. The windows, these little frames right here. It's just a lot of different details, and this is why we need to be a little bit careful when we do our drawing. We need to keep in mind that even though you can draw almost infinitely thin line segments with SketchUp, you can't print infinitely thin lines on a 3D printer. Let me explain. Here is, for example, the fuselage right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just move it a touch here, and now I'm going to slice it. And that's going to give us this blueprint here. Kind of a color code, but each of these lines here is filament that gets extruded out to form our shape. You'll notice if we come up here to the window, or the cockpit windows, that when I modeled this the first time, I was really careful in this area not to get too close, because if you look right in here, you can see that that's only 2 layers thick for the perimeter going around the windows. Same with the doors, same around here. So we can't get too detailed. The star in the back here, see it, there's a lot more detail in the SketchUp model when I made it, but the 3D printer just couldn't slice it that precisely. So let's keep that in mind as we go ahead and get started on the fuselage. Let's go to our top view, and then we're going to zoom in on the nose, and I'm going to go ahead and do the nose, which is the most complicated part first, and then just kind of quickly click around, because if you can do the nose, you can do the rest of it. So we're going to start with the line tool just as before. Maybe I'll start about right here, and we want to make sure that we stay on the face of the image with each click. It's a straight line there for the front of the windshield. And the more you zoom in and the more little edges that you create here, the smoother your model's going to be. That is, the edges of it when you 3D print it. So I'm going to come straight down like that, and just kind of come along here. And then we can't see behind the engine and the wing, but we'll just kind of guess here. Again, zoom in and out. And let's see, maybe I'll connect that endpoint along that edge there, and then erase this and this. Okay. And then let's see here. I want to go ahead and just close that so that we have a face. So there's an endpoint, and I think I started up here. There we go. So there's our face. And so let's go ahead and put the nose on this, and I'm going to try an arc. Let's see how that works. So there's my start point, there's my end point. I'll just pull it out like that. You know what? I'm going to redo that, and this is why. I want it to be really smooth, so when I click on arc, it asks me the number of sides, or it doesn't ask me the number of sides, but I can bump it up and down, remember, by holding down the Option key and pressing the plus and minus sign. So 10's probably going to be pretty good. Again, it just depends upon what level of detail you want. If it's too many sides, you're going to have to shorten it. We'll take our eraser tool and we'll erase that line segment right there. And now we're going to turn on X-ray so that we can trace. And there isn't really any way I can put this window framing in. You just have to be careful. Remember, your 3D printer extrudes liquid filament at typically 0.4 millimeters. So if I take and put a guideline off of this edge right here and pull out, and then type in 0.4 and hit enter, that is the width right there of one bead of filament. So that would be I kind of like to have two beads. So what I'm going to do now, when I go ahead and make this line, I'll erase that guideline or undo it here, is I'm just going to maybe come to here, across to here, down to here, there, not on the line but on the face, like so. And the reason it didn't make a face is because we have X-ray turned on. See, that's its own face now. So let's turn X-ray back on there, and let's put in one divider anyway. So I'm going to take this line right here, grab my tape measure tool, and don't grab it by the midpoint, just grab it along the edge here. And let's just pull back parallel to that, maybe at about right there. I'm going to erase this guideline because I don't need it anymore. There we go. And then I'm going to draw a line here. Whoops, I missed. Let's zoom in here. From this intersection up to this intersection, which splits that into two faces. And then I'm going to take my tape measure tool and I'm going to pull back this way. Okay, excuse me there, phone rang. So I'm going to just copy this line over. A lot of ways I could do it, but I think what I'm going to do is just pull out another guideline. Oh, maybe to about there. And that's 0.7. Let's make it 0.8. So I'll type in 0.8 and hit enter. And now I'm just going to draw another line from this intersection down to there, and then erase that line segment and that line segment, and I can erase the guidelines, and there are my windows. So I'll turn X-ray mode off, select this face and delete it, and select that face and delete it, and that looks pretty good. We'll see how it slices. We can come back in and fix that. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop talking here and just start filling in some of this geometry, and as I need to, I can come back and explain things for you. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So let's go in and talk about this tail wheel here. I'm just going to type in C for circle, and that's going to make a face like this. And then I'm just going to take and make a line from maybe about here. There's the center. And then from here, maybe up to about there. And then I'm going to erase that segment, and those segments. So there's my tail wheel. And one more thing I'm going to do. I'm going to put in these cabin windows. So follow along closely. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to make one of them. So just R for rectangle, and maybe from about there to about there. Now, this is a face, and it's also 4 edges. So if I double click on it, not triple click, but just double click, there we go. Then I've now selected the face, and I've selected the edges. Now I'm going to do a move copy, but there is no specific command. But watch this, it's pretty cool. I'm going to type in M for move, and I'm just going to click anywhere on the face. Doesn't really matter. And see, now I can move it around anywhere I want. However, if I tap my Option or Alt key, it's now making a copy. And so I'm going to come down to this window right here, and I'm going to click. Now I could do that 1, 2, 3, 4 more times, or I can just go 5 divided by and hit enter. And I've just made 5 or 6 equally spaced windows that are all the same size. Let's do that one more time. So I'm going to double click on that. I'm going to type in M for move. I'm going to click just about anywhere, and as I start to move it, since I want to make a copy, I need to tap my Option or Alt key, click where I want to place it, and then I can just go ahead and type in 5 divided by, but say I wasn't very good at math. Say I put in 3 divided by and hit enter. Well, it makes 3. I go, no, I need more than that. So again, without clicking or doing anything, just again, type in 4 divided by. See what that looks like. 5 divided by does it for us. And so now we're going to go in and delete these faces. So open up that window, that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And the next thing we're going to do is make the openings for our wing and horizontal stabilizer. Before we go ahead and cut the openings for our wing and horizontal stabilizer, let's verify our measurements. So to do that, I'm going to type in T for tape measure, and I'm just going to click on the top edge of the wing and come down to the bottom edge along the blue axis, and I get 2.5 millimeters, which, if I remember, is what we did correctly. We'll come over here, and we'll just go ahead and measure along this vertical line segment. It's also 2.5, so that's good to know. So I'll hit escape, and I'll come from this midpoint, click, and come down along the green axis to that edge there, and it's 20 millimeters, so that's good. And so let's do the same thing up here. So from that midpoint down to that edge, it's 27.690. I must have made a mistake somewhere because I wanted to have whole numbers. Hopefully you do. So I'm going to write that one down. I'm not going to change anything because I haven't made the opening yet. So let's just go ahead and go to that opening. And so we'll go to our top view and turn on X-ray. And it looks like the wing starts about right in this area here. So let's just kind of zoom in here. And let's flatten the bottom. So maybe from about there to about there along that edge. And then I'll come in and erase that line segment, and that one. And then I'm going to make a rectangle tool and kind of just start it about where the wing looks on your drawing underneath. And I'm going to click and I'm going to come up like this. And now I'm looking down at my measurement dialog box and it's telling me that the length is first. So here's where I'll type in 27.690. Your number might be completely different, comma, 2.5 millimeters, and hit enter. And so now when I take and turn off X-ray and erase that segment right there, I've now got a notch or an opening that I can glue my wing into the bottom of the fuselage. For the horizontal stabilizer, it's essentially the same process. So I'm going to type in R for rectangle, start about there, come down to about here. Now see, I'm getting awfully close to this edge down here, and so I'm going to cheat a little bit. Instead, I'm going to start a distance about, maybe about there, and come up this way like this, which will place a little bit higher in the fuselage body, but that's okay. So I'm going to type in 20 millimeters, comma, 2.5 millimeters, hit enter, and now I can take and select this face and delete it. Now you might find that these openings, even though they're exact within CAD, might need to be a little bit bigger, or that you might need to do a little bit of shaving with some sandpaper or a sharp knife to get them to fit, because whenever you have a hole in a 3D printed object, even though SketchUp is telling print a hole that is 2.5 millimeters tall, you have to think about the process. I mean, it's taking this soft, gooey filament and it's squishing it down on the layer below it, one layer at a time. So the holes always end up being just a little bit smaller than what you model with your CAD program. But I think we're probably going to be pretty close, and I don't mind doing a little shaving and sanding. I'd rather have it be a tight fit than a loose, sloppy fit. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then we'll go ahead and add a little bit more detail. Now our fuselage side is still flat. It's just a face. And so before we extrude it or give it thickness with the push-pull tool, now would be a good time for me to come in and just clean up a few things that bug me a little bit. Like this little area right here, it's just a little too sharp. So I can put it in arc, but it's going to be a really small arc, and so instead what I'll go ahead and do is just take and kind of cut off the corner with the line tool. So I'll zoom in here, maybe from about there on the edge to maybe to about there, and then erase these two segments, and that looks a whole bunch better. This area right here is kind of a little bit thin. Remember when we looked at the slicing software and you could see the individual lines of filament? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to give myself a little bit of room here, and maybe come back to about there, and then it healed the face, so, but that's super easy to fix. Use my select tool and delete it, and I've now got more room in this area here. So when you zoom back out, that just looks a little bit smoother. I've got a bump right there I don't like, so that is a bump in, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line, say from there, maybe to about there. And again, your model is going to be different than mine, but I'm just showing you just some ways we can go ahead and take about cleaning it up. Let's go back here to the tail. I don't care for that sharp point right there, so I'm just going to come in here and maybe give it a little bit of relief like that. And let's see, up here, whoops. See, my mouse does that sometimes. I don't know if yours does too. I'm just working a little bit faster than SketchUp can work in the cloud. Remember, your Chromebook or whatever is not really doing the heavy computing. That's being done on the SketchUp servers. So I'm going to clean this up here. just kind of take the sharp corner off. Oh, little extra line segment right there. There we go. And here's a spot right here. Let's see. I'm going to try to put an arc in here. So this is naturally smoother. So I'll start my arc there. Come to here. Pull down until it's about tangent with this line. Okay, number of segments is too small for the given angle. So let's try going option minus, 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 minus. Let's say 6 sides. We'll hit enter and let's try the arc again. There we go. So we'll erase that segment. And that's all the diddling around that I'll do with it for now. So again, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to go to, I don't know, any 3D view. I'm going to click on my fuselage. It should be all one continuous face. P for push pull. Pull it up to give it thickness. Now we made our wings 2.5 millimeters. I'm going to make my fuselage 4 millimeters. And the reason I'm doing that is the fuselage is the widest part of an actual DC-3, and so giving it a little bit more thickness means a little more filament, means takes a little bit longer to print, but in my opinion the finished product will look a whole bunch better. Now I can't believe I forgot to mention this earlier. Right now this is made up of edges and faces. So what we want to do is triple click on it to select all of the geometry, right click, and make it a group. That only doesn't help protect your model, but it's just a very, very important working habit to get into with SketchUp. So I'm going to open up the group now by double clicking on it. I'm going to right click and align my face. Oh, I've got the whole thing selected. I'm just going to grab, double click to open it up, select on one face, and align my view. There we go. Turn on X-ray mode, and I'll come in and add this door. So R for rectangle, start about there, just kind of follow up to about there, and then A for arc, start there, and come up until it tells me I have a half circle. There we go. Click and erase that. Let's go to the tail next. And let's go ahead and add our rudder. So I'll start about there, come to about there, maybe to there, there, and back down to there. And that creates a separate face for me. Then I'm typing O for offset because 3D printer can't print just a line. It needs to print kind of a groove like we did with our invasion stripes. I'll click inside. Oop. I hit O for orbit. I meant F for offset. There we go. And I'll just make my groove about that deep. Then I'll come down here with my line tool and split that face like so. And I've now got my groove for my rudder. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put in this door. This looks like a door for both cargo and paratroopers. Can't say for sure, but just going to take my line tool, come across like so, down to here, and then I'm going to mouse up here and just pause over that endpoint. And it's probably really hard to see, but I'm getting a green dashed line telling me that I'm drawing along the green axis. So I'll click, and now when I come up, it comes up vertical to that point where I started. So we've got that face there. I don't think that's too much. Let's check our tape measure here to make sure I didn't make this area here too thin. No, that's 1.3, so that will be 3 beads of filament for the perimeter, so that's going to be just fine. Now I'm going to go to a 3D view. I'm going to turn X-ray off, and I'm going to come in and use my push-pull tool to push this down, maybe about that much. If it's too shallow, you're not going to see it. Then I'm going to come over to my, okay, so again, my mouse goofed up. So this is what I have to do sometimes. Make sure your drawing is saved, and then refresh the page. Now that's going to take you back to your SketchUp home, and now I'll double click and open up my model. I have to reopen the scenes window and also the camera window. I'll go back to my top view here. I'll go Shift C to do zoom extents to see where I'm at. Now when I refresh the page, it closed the group, so I'm going to double click it for editing again, and then it probably is not going to remember the same depth as the door over here, so what I'm going to do is P for push pull. I'm going to push it down, and then I'm going to slowly bring my mouse all the way over to that surface right there, so both doors are now equally as deep. And then I'm going to just try to move slowly up here to the tail and grab that surface and double click, and I'm going to close the group, and that's all I'm going to do with the fuselage. So I'll save it, and next we'll work with the engines. So I was just getting set up here to make the engine and landing gear next, and I kind of looked at this door here and I thought, well, it doesn't really look super great. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and double click to open up my group for editing. And then I'll come into here so you can see what's going on. I'm going to type in F for offset. Kind of same thing I did with the rudder. Maybe to about right there. And that gives me a face here and a face here. And I'm going to take this face, P for push pull, start to pull it up. How far? I'll just mouse over here so that it's even with the face of the fuselage. And I'll close my group, and then we'll go back to the top view here, and we'll get started on our landing gear. Now the fuselage is covering up the drawing, so I'm going to just click on it, right click, and hide it. If I want to bring it back, I can come over here into my display menu, click on hidden objects, and you kind of get that it's still hidden, but you can see it now. And you can right click and unhide it, but I want it hidden, so I'm going to just go ahead and hide it, and then I'll turn off hidden objects. So the tire for the landing gear is retracted, and so I need to know from the center of the axle here to the bottom of the engine cowling what that distance is. So I'll zoom out, bring my mouse up to the area I'm interested in, and zoom in, and now I'll just use my tape measure tool to measure to where I figure about the bottom of the cowling is, to the center of the axle. It looks like it's about 6 millimeters. So that's a good place to start. That'll get us close enough. So I'll zoom out and zoom back in here, and I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line, say from about there for the bottom of the cowling. I'm going to draw it down and type in 6 millimeters. Then I'm going to take and make a circle, and let's see, this wheel is about, let's see, it looks like it's about 3.6 millimeters. So I'm just measuring it because where I want the center of the circle to be is right here. So I'm going to pull out and type in 3.6 millimeters, and then I don't need this line anymore, nor that line, and so I'm just going to leave it like that. So next I'm going to go ahead and draw the engine cowling. So I'll zoom in here, and again we have to do a little bit of guessing because we're not entirely sure where all the points are from this 2D view. And I'll come down back to about here, and looking at the top view of the engine here, and you can see that the engine cowling goes about halfway back on the wing. So that's what I'm going to do down here. I'll turn X-ray mode back off. Don't really need it. Actually, I'll leave it back on because it makes it made just a little bit easier for you to see these line segments. I'll maybe come to about there. And then I'm just going to bring a point down along there. And you'll see why in just a second. So come to about there. Maybe about there. And I'll come across. I'll just find that point right up there. Make sure I'm along the red axis. And then kind of start to come up. And I'm just going to draw a line to where I think about the center of the cowling is. And then erase that segment right there. So I've got that part done. So let's see, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line from the center of the circle. Now you probably can't see the center of the circle, and if you can't, click on the circle itself and then right click to find the center, and it'll give you that little cross showing you where the center of the circle is. So I'm just going to draw a line coming up here to there, and then I'll come in here with my tape measure tool. Well, actually, we don't need to be that precise. I'm just going to draw a line from about there up to here along the green axis. Yeah, make sure you're on the green axis, or at least along the face. So it comes up like so, and then I'll erase that stuff and that and that, that and that. And I've still got my center. So now I'm going to draw the supports for the landing gear. So same process. I'm going to draw from about there, maybe up to there, and then I'll just kind of do the same thing. Maybe from there to there, and come in here and draw it from there so it looks pretty parallel, and then I'll do some erasing. And again, you don't want to make it too thin, because depending upon the size of your 3D printer, that becomes a little bit of a problem. So then I'll just take this face and delete it, and I've now got my landing gear. And so let's now come in to make the propeller shaft. This is the part right here that the propeller is attached to. And so let's see, I'm going to make some quick work here. Just going to use a rectangle, draw from there down to about there, and then to give it a little bit of thickness, I'm going to draw another rectangle from there, say to about, looks like the hub is back about here, and then A for arc. So start my arc there, finish it there, and pull out a bulge like about so. Oops, too many segments again. So let's crank it down. Hold down your Option key and subtract them. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Let's try 7. I'll hit enter, pull it out, and that worked. So now we'll erase that, and that, and that, and that, and that. So I've now got my propeller shaft. Well, I can also erase that line segment right there. So I'm just going to come down here, right about there, come across from there, then a line from there down to there, click, click, and erase that extra line segment. So then I'm going to draw a selection rectangle carefully from about there to there. So that's going to select this box plus those edges. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it, and I'll just go ahead and put it about right there, and then I'm going to move it, and I'm going to grab that midpoint and bring it up to that midpoint so the two blades are over each other. Oop, got a little extra line segments here from my copying and pasting, but you can just go ahead and erase those. And let's see, we don't need this line right here, and that line right there. The next thing we're going to do is cut a notch in the engine so that it interlocks up here with the wing on the left and the right at the same depth. So we need to know basically how far it is from the front of our engine to the leading edge of our wing. So I'm just going to use my tape measure tool, click there, and come down along the green axis here. It tells me it's about 11 millimeters. It doesn't have to be exact. So now we'll come into our engine here, and I am going to use that number, my tape measure tool, to pull a guideline back. And to do that, you just find a spot on here. Try to avoid midpoints, but just find a spot along the edge, pull back, doesn't matter how far, and then just type in 11 and hit return. So this is 11 millimeters back, and that's good. So next thing I'm going to do is essentially the same thing. I'm going to make another guideline. I'm going to pull it down, and this time I want it to be about there in the center. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, so we'll just say right there. And then our wing is 2.5 millimeters thick, and so I'm going to pull a guideline up. I'm going to type in half of 2.5, which is 1.25 according to the new math, and then I'm going to bring another one down and type in 1.25. So now between this top guide and this bottom guide, I've got a 2.5 millimeter tall slot. So I'm just going to take my line tool and go from this intersection to that intersection to that intersection to that intersection, and that splits the face like so. So I can just go ahead and delete that face. Oh, got a couple extra lines right there, so let's erase those. And so now we have our notch complete. So now we'll go to any 3D view, doesn't really matter. Use our select tool to grab that face. It should all be one face. If not, you've got an extra edge in there someplace. So P for push pull. I'm going to pull it up and type in 2.5 and hit return. Then I'm going to take and lock all this geometry together, and I'm going to right click and make it a group. This next part's kind of fun, and while we're going to print this landing gear and engine and propeller assembly just as it's oriented now, flat if you will, I want to go ahead and see how it fits in my wing. So that's going to involve a little bit of moving and rotating. So let's get to it. So to rotate, you press the Q key. So this part is selected. I'll press Q for rotate, and then I'll click on the, not this face, I want to turn it up sideways first. So I'm going to click along the red axis. I'm going to just come up along the blue axis. Doesn't matter how far, but just make sure you have a blue dashed line. And I'll click, and then I'll pull it down like this. And it'll usually snap to about 90 degrees, but if you just want to be absolutely sure, just type in 90 and hit enter. Then we're going to do that one more time. I'm going to come to a top horizontal surface, like say that top of the part of the engine right there. I'm going to come along the red axis, or it could come out along the green axis as well. Click and move it around, and again type in 90 and hit enter. So we now have the proper orientation. So what I'm going to do next is go ahead and move it. So let's see here. Where's it going to touch? This point right here, where the little hand is going to line up with this point back here. So I'll type M for move, and I'll come and I'll grab that top point right there. And then I can't see exactly what I'm doing here, so I'm going to type X for X-ray, and I'm going to come in, I'm going to zoom in here and put that point right there, turn X-ray off, and let's see how that looks. Yep, I like that. So to get it back so it's flat, I'm going to just do some undos there. And then I need 2 of these, don't I? So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it and just put it anywhere. Because once we get it on our printer bed for slicing, we can go ahead and move the position of the various pieces. So we now have all of our parts constructed. So let's just do a little bit of house cleaning here. Grab my engine there, grab the move tool, maybe move that there. Select this one here, M for move, click, and pull it down there. And I'll come over here under displays and turn on hidden objects so that I can see my fuselage. I'll right click on it with the select tool and unhide it. I'll go ahead and save it. And the next thing I'm going to do is export it. So I'm going to export it as an STL file. That is for 3D printing. So I'll go ahead and just call it C47. Doesn't matter what you call it or where you put it, as long as you can find it. Then I'm going to go to my slicing software. This is Prusa Slicer. It's free. The other most popular one is Cura. So I'm going to add my C47 STL file. And it looks like it came in okay. I'll go ahead now and slice it. I'm pretty sure the wings are going to be okay. Let's see how we did up here. Oh, that's going to be fine. So you see, this is a perimeter here. We've got a full bead of filament on the outside perimeter and a full bead of filament on the inside perimeter for our windows and openings. That door looks okay. That opening looks okay. And let's see, let's take a look at the tail. So we had a spot right there. You can see that I don't have 2 perimeters for the outside of the fuselage. I've got this full one, but it breaks right there. I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. I'd be more worried about it if this corner and this outside perimeter were actually touching. So we'll see how it prints. Now, with this particular model, this fits on my printer just fine. But what if I wanted to make it bigger? And you can do this with just about any slicing software out there. Or you can scale your SketchUp model, but this is a little bit easier. I've got my model here, and so what I'm going to do is down in this corner I've got scale factors. So I'm going to come down here where I have scale factors. Instead of 100%, which is full size, let's try 150%. I'll hit tab. And that makes everything bigger. Now I need to break this into individual parts, and so that's this button right here. So now I can select the wing and just kind of move it over. If I rotate it, I might be able to get it on the bed. I'm not exactly sure if I can, but we're going to try it. So I'll kind of pull around like that, and then move it down from corner to corner. When it turns green, it tells me it fits. So I'm going to kind of just nudge it up there. I'm going to take my fuselage and rotate it around and pull it over here so it's green and it fits there. Looks like I'm going to make it. I'll take this part, the horizontal stabilizer, and put it up there, and then put the engine there and put engine number 2 right there. And everything's orange, so everything fits. So I'll go ahead and slice it one more time. Prusa Slicer has a color coding that they do for the different types of fill. We don't need to go into all of that, but we'll come into, say, right about here. So the orange is the outer perimeter, and then the yellow secondary perimeter, and then this is just the top fill. And then as we start to move down through the layers, there's another layer fill, kind of crisscrossing back and forth. And then there's our honeycomb fill on the inside. And when we get down through the honeycomb fill, we get back to different kind of layers that sort of crisscross perpendicular to each other. And there's our very bottom layer. So with that completed, I just go ahead and export the G code, which creates a .gcode file. Now go ahead and replace it. Doesn't really matter what you call it or where you put it as long as you can find it. So that G code file is the file that you'll transfer to an SD card, or you'll send it to your printer via a USB cable for 3D printing.